first Xenoblade Chronicles is one of my favorite RPGs. The plot, the setting, the tone, the characters, they all mesh together so well. Xenoblade Chronicles X carries over none of that. None of the characters return. The plot is completely unrelated, and it takes place on a whole new world. As someone who was in love with the first game when I played it last year, I was a bit hesitant to jump into this one. It was so obviously not like the first game. I was worried that I'd dislike it simply because of that. But of course, just because something's different doesn't mean it's bad. They wanted to try something new for this entry in the series, and they definitely swung for the fences there. How well did that turn out for them? In my journey to play through every RPG that's ever been released and rank them all alongside each other, I found out how well it went for them. And you're about to too. Welcome to Best RPG Ever, and this is Xenoblade Chronicles X Definitive Edition. By the way, I'll keep spoiler talk to a specific section after I talk about the story. I'll give you plenty of heads up and a time code to skip to if you want to skip that. Alright, we'll start with the gameplay. Gameplay is where Xenoblade as a series tries to stand out from other RPGs in the space, especially X here. It's not turn-based like Dragon Quest, and it's not quite action-y like Final Fantasy VII Remake. It's more MMO than anything else. You walk up to enemies and auto-attack them. You can throw out your arts at the bottom here to do extra damage to them. It's super simple when you put it like that, but underneath the surface, there's so much going on. Well, it's not really underneath the surface, it's plainly on the surface. If you've never played a Xenoblade game before, this UI might intimidate you. And that's normal, it did to me at first. There's so much stuff here. Let's break down all the systems you can see on screen right now. Your arts are along the bottom here. These are special attacks with all kinds of unique effects. If you're in the right position to activate a bonus effect, this exclamation point will appear. You have the morale bar here. That does something, I think. Then there's a bar where you gain TP as you attack. That lets you activate overdrive or revive a teammate when you reach 3000. Up here you have the topple indicator. Some of your attacks can make enemies fall over and they won't attack for a bit. Got the debuff bar? I don't know what any of these icons mean. That's all I really want to spend time talking about right now, but I could go on. Overdrive is a whole other can of worms, where you power up, but you gotta use certain abilities in order to gain special effects, as well as increase the timer to stay in overdrive. There's just kinda a lot going on mechanically. It takes you a while to get into the swing of things, but it does become fun. Kinda. There's a lot of room for customization in this game. There's a bunch of classes and weapon types that determine the arts you can use, armor that dictates your stats, passive upgrades that specialize your character, soul voices that give you bonuses in combat for activating specific triggers, augments that you can slot your armor into. Whew. It's obvious this is a game for the min-maxers. I can imagine the YouTube build videos out there, the ones that walk you through each of the systems I just mentioned and give you the exact choices to make to have the strongest party members possible. And hey, if that's the type of gamer you are, you'll get a lot of enjoyment out of Xenoblade Chronicles X. There's so many giant monsters to test all those crazy builds on. While recording footage for my Video Game World Tour episode, I still saw a lot of enemies that were a higher level than me, and that was after I beat the main story. This is one of those RPGs where you could spend more time in the post-game than you do during the main story. But, that's not the type of RPG enjoyer I am. I'm here for the story. Don't get me wrong, I like when an RPG has great gameplay, but this almost feels like too much, for me at least. When I think back to my time with the first Xenoblade Chronicles, the only aspect of the game's mechanics that I didn't really dive into was armor augments. I knew you could craft them and I tried it a couple times, but it wasn't for me. There are like 4 or 5 systems I didn't engage with in this game. Armor augments, gear crafting, gear upgrading, all the multiplayer stuff. Gear trait upgrading? I completely forgot that was a thing. I only saw it just now. And Skells. Skells are the game's big draw. They're mechs that you can pilot around a handful of chapters into the game. They really do make it feel special. The fact that the game delays your obtaining of one for like a dozen hours or so makes it feel so meaningful when you do get to use one. You're speeding through the environment and whacking bad guys like you just couldn't before. Anyway, I never dove super into the skill upgrading process. I know you can buy armor and weapons and all that, but I never paid that much attention to what I was getting. I just bought the most powerful upgrade I could. Now, you might call me a moron for choosing not to engage with many of the game's systems. And sure, I could see where you're coming from with that. But when there's so many of these that are thrown at me, my eyes start to glaze over. It's overchoice. There's so much to decide on when you realize it's time for an upgrade. Do I buy new armor? New weapons? New scale armor? New scale weapons? And then what do I spend my battle points on? Do I upgrade arts or passives? Or should I completely change my class and try another out? Oh, and then you gotta do that for your 3 other party members. Each of them have their own weapons and armor, skill weapons and armor, and battle points to spend. And you only have so much money, you can't buy the most effective armor for everyone. But even if you could, even if you had 1 trillion xenoblade bucks, you still gotta go into the menus to spend it all and equip it. You could easily spend like half an hour just doing menu stuff. That's not where the fun of this game is. It's in exploring the world and seeing the cool sights. If you could get through this game just fine without having to do that all the time, I wouldn't be too miffed about it. I got through Xenoblade Chronicles just fine without needing to use armor augments. But there were some points of this game where I hit a roadblock. A boss was too hard, and I just couldn't defeat it with my current lineup. Overleveling like any other RPG isn't really an option because you don't gain stats as you level up. I think all your stats come from the gear you equip, which, fair enough, does require you to level up. But still, simply leveling up isn't enough. You first gotta make all the money to buy the powerful gear, go through the process of getting it all, and then equipping it. And even when I did buy gear that was appropriate for the level I was at, I still felt like I couldn't defeat some of these bosses. I genuinely wasn't sure what I was doing wrong. Let me lay it out for you. I beat Earthbound recently, and there was a time or two early on where some enemies were giving me trouble. In a game as simple as this, I know there are 3 variables that determine if I'm able to get past an area. My level, my gear, and items to use in battle, like for healing or whatever. I can look at those 3 variables and determine if my current setup is appropriate for where I am in the game. I can level up a bunch to raise my stats, make sure I have the most powerful weapon equipped for this part of the game, and stock up on healing items for use in battle. That's all I have to keep track of. There are so many more variables in this game. Weapons, armor, skill weapons and armor, arts, the levels of those arts, passives, soul voices. It's so hard to know where you're going wrong with your current build. There's usually not one best piece of gear. It's almost always specialized. So it's not like Earthbound, where if you have Paula equip the thick frying pan and Threed, you know you have the best offensive option for her. It's all about making your own build in this game. In theory, I love that. I love the idea of taking in all my available options to perfectly craft my character towards a playstyle that suits me. But it is so easy to mess that up with so much going on. Like, I look at this Soul Voices screen, and my brain shuts down. Each one of these triggers has one of 3 benefits that you can choose. Maybe these are super suboptimal, and why I had such a problem with some of those fights earlier. I don't know. And this is just one of like the 6 or 7 options of your character that you can tweak. Overchoice is a problem with this game for me. But if you're able to shut out most of that stuff, there's still a lot to love. Even though I didn't engage with armor augments or dive all into skill upgrading, I was still able to beat the game. You'll be asked if you want to lower the difficulty of a boss fight if you die to it 3 times. And genuinely, I think this is the only time I've accepted that kind of help in a game. I've always turned my nose up at assist options like that. Like, I'm not as bad as you think, game. I can overcome your challenge. I don't need easy mode. But to protect my sanity, I did choose easy mode with some of these fights. Picking the easier way out let me not have to deal with all the min-maxing stuff that I don't like in this game, and focus on the stuff I really like, which we'll talk about later. I've been kinda negative throughout the gameplay section here, but I don't want it to sound all bad. I did have fun with the moment-to-moment gameplay. It's satisfying to hit those soul voice prompts and attack enemies' weak spots. And flying around in a Skell is literally an unmatched feeling in video games for me. The bottom line for the gameplay. If you want an insane amount of options to finally craft a build for you and all of your teammates, this is the game for you. But if that's not really what you look for in a game, then this might be a bit overwhelming. I've never liked managing party members' gear in RPGs. That's something I've always felt. Maybe you do like that? More power to you. You'll love the gameplay here. Okay, that section's over. I didn't expect to talk about the gameplay that long. Anyway, let's talk about the pacing. Pacing really matters in these long-ass JRPGs. They need to keep you invested for dozens and dozens of hours. There's only 12 chapters in this game. A 13th was added with the definitive edition, and it's split into 3 parts. Between each of those chapters, the game requires you to reach a certain level, and usually do some open world stuff before doing the next one. It forces you to take a break between story beats and engage with the side content of this game. I didn't mind it. For reasons I'll elaborate on soon, I didn't mind having breaks from the story. Often, I would reach the point where the requirements for the next story mission were revealed, and I'd already met them. I was completing side objectives in the open world just because I like doing them. But for people that might not have chosen to engage with the open world activities as much as I did, I think it's good that you're forced to do it a little bit. That's the heart of this game. They want you to go out into Mira and wander around. They found a way to get the player to experience that, even if they wanted to just grind out story stuff. It's smart. As for the pacing of the story itself, I think it's alright too. The fact that story missions are broken down into clearly delineated chapters makes it easy to digest. You'll be called to the base, your boss will tell you something's going on out in the world, and then you go do that thing. Something big, plot-wise, might happen, and the boss will tell you to wait it out for a bit. Then he'll call you back when things are ready to get moving again. That's when it's time to meet the quest requirements I talked about earlier. On a surface level, I think the hooks placed at the ends of each of those chapters are meaningful enough to get you to keep playing. You kinda want to see what happens next. It doesn't feel like the story treads water by sticking on any plot point for too long. Things move by at a nice pace. I never wanted to drop the game because of a low point it could have hit partway through. That's mostly because the story doesn't really have any big peaks. The story in this game is what I would call perfectly acceptable. It has a somewhat unique premise, it gives your party motivation, and then things are resolved at the end. It's not bad, really. In fact, the plot is somewhat interesting. It's held back by something, yet again, we'll talk about later. But the plot itself has a good hook. Earth is destroyed, and a tiny fraction of humanity is all that's left. They escape in their tiny little ship. But the aliens that destroyed Earth gave chase and ended up finding them. You both land on Mira, and you're forced to settle things once and for all. These aliens want humans extinct for some reason, and you don't know why. That's kinda interesting. It gets you thinking about why this random alien race has such a grudge with humanity. And I think the reveal it leads up to is a fun answer to that question. Trying to think of anything I'd want to say before the spoiler section. I got nothing. My main beef with this game isn't the plot. Now we're entering
the spoiler zone.
Skip to the time code on screen if you don't want to be spoiled by late game stuff. Just gonna wait for a second for people to skip ahead. Okay, spoiler time. I feel like I need to break this into 2 parts. The reveals of the base game were alright. Lau being a spy for the Ganglion was a neat idea. It's kinda cool how you and Elma come to that realization a chapter or 2 before shit really hits the fan with him. It gives you time to think about if you trust him as a party member or not. Though in retrospect, it feels obvious that you shouldn't once Elma starts to distrust him. Maybe it would have been more impactful if he was a red herring and it was someone else who was a spy. The whole mimeosome concept was a home run for me though. It really makes you question what makes you, you. All of the humans you see throughout the game are robots with human consciousness. Maybe it's just because of all the AI discourse these days, but I find this topic fascinating. If a robot can think and feel, what makes them any different from a human? I've been watching Pluto too recently, so I'm all in on this trope. And then it's revealed that the human bodies that these robots' consciousness are supposedly being pulled from don't exist anymore. They were destroyed way back when Earth got blowed up. Their one thing that they thought connected them to their human selves is gone. It was always gone. They thought they had their human bodies just waiting to be recovered inside the Lifehold, but they don't exist anymore. For as much as this game doesn't feel like the first Xenoblade Chronicles, this whole plot point really feels like it. Though I could do a spoiler section within a spoiler section to talk about spoilers for that game, I won't. I'll just say that the Mimeosome reveal in this game really sticks with me like the final crazy reveal does in that game. I'm glad they were able to capture that part of Xenoblade Chronicles at least. I didn't think about it in the moment, but the game really does end on a cliffhanger. Lao wakes up on a beach and a hooded figure approaches him. We have no idea who that is. And Elma discovers that the server that should have housed everyone's consciousness is just destroyed. All the humans you see shouldn't be alive right now. She speculates that something about planet Mira is what keeps everyone alive. That was just it. For 10 years, this game remained with such obvious sequel bait. Then Xenoblade Chronicles 2 comes out and they just kinda abandon this storyline. Thankfully, they added another chapter to the definitive edition and it explains all that. For whatever reason, the 13th chapter felt so much stronger to me emotionally than the previous 12 chapters in the base game. They added a new character, Al, and he feels like a more traditional Xenoblade character to me. Everything about him oozes so much more charm than the other characters in this game. But, gonna be honest, they kinda lost me with the plot developments. It forgoes the simplicity of the base game story in favor of adding multiple universes. I think my brain fell asleep while watching some of these cutscenes, so I don't really remember what exactly was going on. I know they briefly showed a screenshot of Xenoblade Chronicles 1 and 2 while talking about parallel universes. That was weird. I don't know, it's a weird dichotomy. I followed along with the base game's story fine, but I felt emotionally disconnected for most of it. But then the definitive edition's extra story comes in, and I don't really follow it, but it emotionally resonates with me. The writing feels more like the other mainline games in the series, but it was retrofitted to be in a game that initially didn't have that kind of writing. It's weird. It's weird. I'm glad it got an ending though. I'm sure this was satisfying to fans who have waited all this time to finally see the ending to this story. Or maybe they hated it, I don't know. Leave a comment letting me know what you thought about this ending if you waited 10 years to see it. This game feels like not a traditional Xenoblade game in so many ways, and then they leaned into it with this Chapter 13 ending. I can imagine it might be polarizing. I think that's it for spoilers. Welcome back, all you non-spoiled people. Finally, I get to talk about my favorite part of RPGs, the characters. The characters are how you experience the story. They're what ground you in the world. They're what I remember long after rolling the credits and moving on. Xenoblade Chronicles characters are some of my favorite in an RPG. The only RPG I can think of with better characters is Final Fantasy VII, and that's saying something. You have such a tight-knit group early on, and it expands a little bit throughout the game. You get a few party members here and there, but not to the detriment of the ones that already exist. They feel like they all get their time in the spotlight. And it's not just about the amount of screen time they get, but the quality of their writing. Their motivations feel real. You understand where they're coming from. They're deep and nuanced. I love the party in that game so much, I decided to make a video just talking about the characters and the journey they each go on. They inspired me. I just loved spending time with and thinking about the characters in that game. I cannot say the same for Xenoblade Chronicles X. The characters are my biggest problem with this game. I just did not care about them. It's not necessarily for lack of trying on the developer's part. You spend a lot of time with Elma and Lynn, the two core party members the story throws at you pretty quickly. You get a good idea of their past and what motivates them throughout this game, but I just did not care about them. Elma is the closest I got to caring about a party member, which is probably because she joins you literally as soon as you gain control after the opening. Lynn, though, I actively hated this character. It's not often that I really hate characters in games. For the most part, I'm just apathetic. Like, I'll be able to see what the writers are going for with someone, but it just won't work for me for whatever reason. It's very rare that a character will actually evoke a negative emotion in me. but Lynn and her stupid Tatsu jokes. She would constantly act like she was gonna cook Tatsu into some dish, and oh, he'd be oblivious at first, but she'd have a dumb smirk on her face, and then she reveals that she wants to eat him, and he's like, "Lindley, mean to Tatsu." I hated the joke the first time I saw it, and then they did it like 15 more times. Maybe it's just because I played Genshin Impact years ago and already got worn down by similar jokes about Paimon in that game, but I couldn't handle it in this game. It drove me mad. I guess, to be fair, she does have some kinda interesting development as a character. I'm sure there's some Lynn fans out there that are upset at me for focusing so much on the negative, but these reviews I make are about my personal journey through the game. And every time I saw these two in the kitchen, I knew it was time to pull out my phone and tune all this out. Those are just 2 characters I talked about. There are 20 other party members to recruit in this game, and I felt nothing about any of those either. They give you a lot of affinity missions to get to know all of them, and sure, some of them are interesting. Some of these characters have interesting backstories. But that's it. That's all they'll have. They'll have a backstory that gives you a reason to do some missions with them, maybe they'll have some character development at the end, and that's that. You're done with them. Compare that to someone like Melia from the first Xenoblade. She changes so much throughout the game and reacts to every big story beat. She has a lot going on. These characters don't. They're treated more like Pokemon to collect, and this screen is your Pokedex that you gotta fill up. I guess, just to reel it back for a second, these characters aren't the worst thing in the world. They aren't offensively awful, except for Lynn and her Tatsu jokes. But as a follow-up to Xenoblade Chronicles, a game with one of the best RPG parties ever, it's a huge letdown, especially to me, as someone who resonates with characters the most out of any other aspect in an RPG. Every now and then, I'll think of Shulk, of Rhine, of Melia. I'll reflect on the journey they went through and how it might relate to my life. After I'm done making this video, I won't think about Elma and Lynn or any of the other 20 party members in this game. I gain no satisfaction upon reflecting on the journey Elma took throughout this game. Sorry, Elma. Alright, the final category. The other stuff. This is where I find an excuse to talk about a part of the game that didn't fit into any of the other sections. And of course, this being a Xenoblade game, you know we gotta talk about the world. This is where the game is at its most gripping. Planet Mira is so much fun to explore. In fact, it's so much fun to explore, I made an hour-long video doing just that. Link will be on the end cards of the video. I won't spend too much time on it here. Just the fact that I felt the need to make an hour-long video documenting all the cool spots in this game should tell you all that you need to know. From the tiniest cave to the biggest, whatever this thing is. You will have so much fun just looking at everything. I'm not even talking about collecting things in these spaces for me. It's fun to simply observe them, to take in the space and appreciate the artistry that went into this world. With that, we can finally move on to the ranking. How does this hold up against every RPG I've played in this series? Well, we've only got 2. I'll place it between .hackgu Volume 1 and the first Xenoblade Chronicles. Does a hell of a lot of things better than the former, but pales in comparison to the latter. Like I said in the previous entry to this series, this ranking will start to look a little more interesting as I cover more games, I promise. It just takes a while. Thanks for watching, Pretizens. Stay tuned for the next video because we are Earthbound. See you then.